It's not like I have to do all this extra stuff to be a blessing to others, but
Wow.
simply by fulfilling my purpose, I have the opportunity to create an ecosystem for others. So
Wow.
it's not about me trying to do more or
Mm,
me trying to, overextend myself or me trying
Yeah.
to, no, it's about
Yeah.
showing up, being present, fulfilling my purpose gives life to others, and I
Mm-hmm.
receive it from them as well.
yes.
G'day, and welcome back to another episode of the Rise and Form podcast, the podcast that has real talk about forming your character with actually useful psychology.
We're an unlikely duo of an American psychologist and an Aussie psychologist who both love theology and the science of change.
So grab a chair and a hot cup of coffee and open your heart and mind to the conversation.
Yeah. Please follow us on Instagram and Spotify or Apple. That way you can find us easy and know when we post our next episode.
Now on to the show. In this season, we are focusing on the fruit of the Spirit. We will be exploring how we can develop a mind that is clear and flexible and strong, a mindset that rises above the daily grind of survival mode. None of those donuts, things that can really help you form your life and your routines to actually emulate and radiate Christ's image. We pray that this season will bear the Holy Spirit's fruit in your families, in your community, and beyond. We have some amazing guests this season too. They are experts in their fields. There are people who are walking the walk of the Rise and Form approach. So listen in as me and Andrea have real talks with our guests and with each other. We give direction and insight on the psychology and biblical wisdom that can support you to rise and form your life with Jesus at the center. So are you ready? Let's dive in.
Well, hello there, Abe.
Hey, Andrea. How are you
How are
doing?
you? I asked first.
You asked first. I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've got some of that Olympic energy today, and
Wow.
so I'm feeling all right.
I feel you. I went to the gym this morning too at 5:30.
Nice.
But man, I did get a little energy. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I have completed a whole day, which I have. So
Yeah.
I'm ready to go to sleep now.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, well, we're recording this in the afternoon. It's kind of like, it's sleepy time, but we have an exciting guest today.
We do. We have Dr. Tina Armstrong. I love how she puts it on her website. She says she's a licensed psychologist, hope dealer, community builder, wellness transformer, fellow sojourner.
Mm.
I mean, right there. That's just perfect. Like, who even needs to read a whole CV? But I'm still going to because she's pretty awesome.
Do it.
So she has a thriving practice in California centered around the health and well-being of Black women. And she is so passionate about this. Passionate about creating space for Black women where they can be connected and flourish. And we're going to feel that energy today. And she's going to talk about connecting and flourishing. So let's just do it.
Let's go.
Hey everyone, this is Andrea and Abe coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And we have a treat for you today. We have Dr. Tina Armstrong with us. And it's so funny because Abe, I think I was talking to you about this on Saturday, trying to describe like when I actually first met Tina. And so Tina, you might have to remind me because I think I heard about you through a student that I was supervising, and then I reached out to you because I was like, wow, she sounds awesome. And like, is she, because you were doing a support group for students in psychology. And I was like, but what about professionals? Do you do anything for us? Can I be in the group? And I think that's how we met. Does that ring a bell, Tina? Is that?
Yeah, it exactly does. I think you were at Biola at the time.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay. And so I live in that city, but I was working at an institution at another city. But yeah, that's exactly how we met. And we actually did have professionals, those who emerging professionals, recent grads, and then early career folks were a part of the group. But yep, that's how we met.
Okay.
That is how we met.
Do you still have that group?
Yeah. You know what? In some ways, what we're going to be talking about today has morphed into something very similar to that. But yes, in some form, I do.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, see, Abe, I told you the truth. So there you
You
go.
were on. You were spot on, Andrea.
But it feels like we've known each other in so
It
many other
does.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because we know so many people in a similar circle. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been connected, 1 degree of separation.
Well, I'm just gonna watch you guys catch up then, and I'll sit over
That's
here
gonna
with
be
my
the whole
team.
episode. And
Sorry, Abe. Sorry, Abe.
No, I love it. The pressure's off me. No, it's so good to have you here, Dr. Tina, and maybe we'll start with just hearing a formative experience in your life that's profoundly shaped who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right before we kind of started recording, we were talking about a few things. One of them that I would say it's formative, but it's something that more recently occurred to me. So when I was when I had my first child, now I was one of those geriatric pregnancies when I had my first biological child, and so I'm trying to
Is that like
nurse and latch.
that's like 35 or something though, right?
Oh
Or
yeah, I was 39.
yeah, so they call that geriatric, right? That which is just
Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
So by
rude.
the time I had my so rude. So by the
Right.
time I had my next child, I don't know what I was.
Right.
I was after geriatric. But anyways, one of the things that happened was that my son, he just would not latch well when we were inside. And so my lactation specialist, who was just fabulous, but she was more on the woo-woo side of things. And so she was like, go outside. And I was like, go outside? What do you mean by that? And so I went outside, and it was amazing how it changed him night and day, from even the way it regulated him. And so fast forward, for me, I know that one of the things that impact me is actually going outside. So my husband had noticed that I hadn't been gardening for about a month or so, and just my level of irritability, inflexibility, all that stuff. And so once I got back outside, I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, there's just something about that that resets me. And I should know this because I'm from a very small town. I mean, people forget that California has rural areas, but I'm from the Central Valley. So I grew up on a farm. My family still lives there, and there's just something resetting about me being in earth, being in the dirt, me, just being outside. It completely resets my system.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the question you were asking, but
Yeah,
No,
that's
that-
no. But you took me back to where my roots, which was, on the beaches of Western Australia. And so whenever I'm sort of like on sand, beach sand, there's something, and I know like everyone says that too. Like I'm not unique, but like
you're
just,
from Western Australia, so you can say that.
yeah, it kind and I honestly, it feels like I can feel it like kind of add peace to my soul. Like it kind of like that feeling, when it washes over you, and you can just sort of sense like, okay, like I was living in this little bubble all week, and now I'm like out of that bubble, and I feel better. So it's just it's expansive, I guess, or something like that. So I guess that would be mine.
Yeah, I like that word expansive. That is exactly what it is for me. It helps me to reconnect to something much bigger than myself.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It's like I was just thinking we're mind, body, and spirit, all together, and I think that like helps us to connect that with that physical, but also that spiritual of like, okay, I have a creator that put me here. I have a creator that made this ground, and all of that, and kind of like tying us in. The one that I was thinking of was, oh goodness, it was maybe like 8 years ago, and this still stands out to me. So I did like what are those things called? Like not an in-service, but like a retreat, a work retreat. And we did like a play day, and we were outside and we were in the grass, and they were like, take off your shoes. So we took off our shoes and we're just playing. And the sensation after that day has stayed with me. And I have tried to like capture it again, and I have not been able to capture it again in the same to the same extent, but just like literally feeling grounded. I have never felt so grounded before, and just like calm. And it was just something about having my feet like in the grass And I remember like after that, I wanted to like keep it up. So I like went to a park after and just like, don't leave me, you know? But it was just that feeling of just being like you guys are saying, like in the earth and just connected to God's creation, and just like things are just simpler, you know, that way. And so so that's what jumped out to me, and that surprised me too, because I was like not expecting that, you know. But
so I'm wondering if we want to do we want to talk about a formative experience, which is kind of like, you know, one of those aha moments in your life, Tina, or do you feel up to that?
Sure, absolutely. Formative experience. So many. Goodness, I'm going through my Rolodex. I think one of the biggest formative experiences actually of my adult life, my young adult life, was at 23, I started graduate school. Well, I had already had a master's, but I started my doctorate program. But the interesting thing is I also became an adoptive mother. So I literally moved I was on the East Coast, left my master's program that I was going to go to a doctoral program there, moved to California because my family was here, and my biological nephew, he was a month old, but his parents, my biological brother and his girlfriend, weren't able to take care of him. So I moved here, started a doctorate program, and picked up a newborn.
Oh my goodness.
All in a month and a half. I know, naive faith, you know, just faithfully, blissfully naive. So that, I mean, a whole bunch there.
Childlike.
But, oh my gosh, it was childlike faith. But that formed me so much because it took all of my roots from Pixley, where I grew up. Actually, it's called Teviston, but it took all those roots of community and rural life and perseverance and resilience and hard work and all of that to develop this new community in this new city that embraced both this newborn and this new person showing up to be a parent in just amazing ways. And that completely introduced me to adulthood in a way that I had not been living, and just grew me up and matured my faith, my dependence, I mean, just there's so many lessons even now, like 25 years later, that I'm unpacking.
Wow.
Connected to that. So talk about formative. That was significantly formative.
Huge. Yeah.
That's no joke.
No joke. And 25 years still unpacking, I think, is really normalizing, because people, we all have to go through a massive transition in our lives, right? At some point, usually that's kind of the norm, and moving's often a big one, isn't it? Like not just, I mean, so much more than that for you, Tina, in that, but the moving part sounds like that was, I was thinking about Abraham and Sarah, and when they had to move, you know, and they were 75, right? And they had to leave their culture and everything. And
the moving piece was big, but I think even more than that, it was just this transition to motherhood. Like most people have at least 9 months, right? Almost 10 to prepare for that. And so to go from single woman to single mother, I think I wasn't anticipating, though, all of the projections that people would have on me as a single parent. Like I was clueless. I had thought about a number of things, but I hadn't thought about that. And just the challenge of holding what that meant and what that meant for other people. Especially I show up in a new church with this little baby and people don't know me there necessarily, but all people's projections onto me and what I was doing and what I wasn't doing, and I was showing up to a seminary nonetheless, right? And when they interviewed me, I didn't have a baby, but then
suddenly
they're like,
I show up with a brand new baby, you know? So that was a whole thing too.
Wow.
It worked out. Obviously, it was a great community, but it was a lot. There was a lot there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm just, you said all the things that I was thinking. I was like, well, that just seems like a lot going into a doctoral program, not being able to acclimate to having a little one. It's just kind of like there's a lot. And I didn't even think about like people think, oh, single mother and just the negative, thoughts that people might have, and assumptions they might have about that. So,
yeah,
man, talking about stress.
Yeah.
And now you understand why I had to figure out how do you deal with chronic stress.
Yeah.
And you wrote a book about it. And that's it. I mean, you talk about, kind of going from overwhelmed to flourishing in your book, and I can hear how I can hear how you're flourishing now. I can hear how you've made it there now. And there were probably times where you were just in the overwhelm, right? And so I'd love to hear what you mean by how you define flourishing, like what that is.
Sure. I mean, and you think about that, like literally, because my oldest son, he's 25, about to be 26 now. But when I think about that, I was definitely in that overwhelmed space. And to boot, being a psychology intern at various community mental health places and the things that you see in terms of kids. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. This is a lot. But the thing that I had then that I continue to write about now was there was this level of groundedness that I was able to lean on, that I was taught very early on in my rural, small, historically Black community of Teviston, California, that I didn't understand it the way I understand it now, because I didn't have the language for it. But when I talk about flourishing now, it's going beyond thriving. Thriving was a big thing, and thriving is important. Thriving is very much, in the way that I conceptualize it, is very much about the individual, whereas flourishing is about the individual and the communal aspect of that. So I like to use a metaphor of a garden. In most well-balanced ecosystems, you have big trees, you have fruit-bearing trees, you have the pollinators, you have the ground cover that protects against erosion. So flourishing is when all of the individual components in that ecosystem, in that community, are living their fullest to the optimal, right? And then because the grass is doing its job and holding that soil in place, then the water can actually sink in so that the pollinators can grow, and then it attracts the bees and the butterflies so that the fruit trees can get the pollen that it needs to produce the fruit. So flourishing is a communal effort. It's a communal way of thinking about things. So it's like well-being for the individual, but also for the community. And so that's the way I like to talk about it. That's the way it's conceptualized in the book, because relieving chronic stress, it's not something I could go in my little closet and then just kind of repeat some things to myself and then voila, hocus pocus, I'm healed and I'm okay. It's about being in a community, in a system where there are others who are also helping me to be okay, and where I'm contributing to them being okay.
Yeah, just yeah, it's so good. It just kind of like makes me think about how, just some people you probably know in your lives that have like perfect cars and houses and gardens and no connection, and they're not a part of the community, and they're pretty miserable. And even like for me, when I've got focused on that sort of thing rather than, and it's just like, now if my wife listens to this, she's gonna be, you need to work on this. But it's like when the neighbor's just kind of out there, just saying, hey, and just being a part of the community, or when someone's walking past with their dog or whatever it is, and just like being open to that, and all of that, and how I always feel more alive and more grounded and more healthy when I'm in that. And so I like that distinction between thriving and flourishing that you made. That's so important. That community, just having, it's inclusive of all aspects. It's not just making ourselves an island
And your definition of flourishing, I feel like it speaks to those people that are like, oh, I can't take care of myself because that's selfish. It's like, no, in this case, if you're seeking to flourish, you're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing this for everyone. And hopefully everyone is doing the same so that we're all like, you know, flourishing.
Yes. Yes. And it's like each one of those, if you think again about that metaphor of the garden, each one of those plants are living according to how they were designed, or fulfilling their purpose. And by fulfilling their purpose, it's not like I have to do all this extra stuff to be a blessing to others, but simply by fulfilling my purpose, I have the opportunity to create an ecosystem for others.
Wow.
So it's not about me trying to do more, or me trying to, you know, overextend myself, or me trying to, no, it's about showing up, being present, fulfilling my purpose gives life to others, and I receive it from them as well.
Yes. Man, that's just, I love when things get simplified, where it's like this, just, you don't have to do more. Like, because I think many times it's like, okay, what I have to do, what I have to say, what I have to, all these things, okay. And it's like, no, it's like, stay in your lane, in your design, and just work on that and cultivate that. Yeah, that felt good.
Yeah, just
With,
no, you go.
with the awareness that by staying in my lane, I am giving to others.
Yes.
I think because sometimes what can happen is we have the awareness of, but it's like it's turned back onto ourselves, where it's all about me, but it's like, no, it's more expansive than that. It's like at the top of our conversation about, for you, Abe, being in the sand, and for you being in the grass, and for me being in the dirt. You know, it's like
Connected.
Yeah.
Hello, that's the name of the company, Living Connected.
Yeah,
that's
there
the
you
next
go.
book. That's the next
really?
book,
Oh, I
actually.
can't wait.
Right now we're talking about getting rooted. And then after you get rooted, then you get connected.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
Spot on.
Yes.
It is a little goosebumpy, Andrea. I don't know what is happening.
It's simple. Our lives are so
like
complicated. It's like, just make it
yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Make it, like they say, make it make sense.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, I can really relate to, I think, just in my own upbringing and seeing like the women in my family growing up, and just, you know, hustling and striving and doing all this and pouring out, but not having anything for themselves. It wasn't flourishing. It wasn't, you know, thriving even. And this isn't a negative to these women, because I'm so grateful for them. You know, the Black women in my life that brought me up, grandmother, mom, aunties. But, you know, I could see the consequences of that. And Tina, I know that like what you wrote about in Rooted, in your book Rooted, is going to be beneficial to everyone. But I know you specifically write to Black women. And so I guess, can you say a little bit about your desire to like really speak to the Black woman?
Absolutely. So first of all, I am a Black woman, okay? And always have been, and have owned that. Yes. Wink, wink, if anybody's been listening to the media lately. But no, in all seriousness, just recognizing early on in my, like I didn't know how to name it when I was a kid, but growing up in a communal environment, I saw the striving, I saw the worry. I'm the only girl of 3 Black boys, my brothers, and then I have 3 sons, 2 bonus sons, so 5 Black boys. And you know, there's just all these Black men in my family, and I recognize the burden of being a Black woman, yes, in our society, but also being a Black man in our society. So I watched my mom and her friends and the things that they went through with their sons, and there was just a way in which I felt if I could help Black women to flourish, then the environment that they set for their sons, because Black women, we're never just about like just me and my career. Rarely is that the case. Usually I'm a part of my career, then I'm a part of the community in some way, I'm a part of the church, I'm giving back to these civic organizations, I'm taking on all this other stuff. So if we can shift that paradigm to where we recognize that being rooted is fundamental to our faith, Like this piece about stress, it's not just some auxiliary point to add on, but no, this is our faith. This is what God is talking to us about. This is what we read. But back to your question. Sorry, I get a little lost because I love Black women and I love this stuff.
I like the
But
fire.
Yeah.
you did, girl. This
Wake
is
up.
my passion. This is what I was called to. I was born for this. You know, it's pretty amazing to finally in my career be in a space where I can speak to what I was born to. So that is why Black women.
Yeah.
Because there is a health disparity gap. And I really believe that part of my call, part of my purpose, me flourishing, is learning how to is speaking to this gap and helping people to shrink this gap. Because when I was in academia and I'm writing all these papers and I'm doing all this stuff, and it's great. I mean, it is good work. It opens doors for other people of color in general, or just other people who have an interest in working with marginalized populations to be attracted and to come. But for me, I recognized that the work wasn't getting to the everyday person. There's a lot that we already know about in science that has been that is evidence-based, not just evidence-based because it's been normalized or normed on white populations or white male populations, but even within populations of color, that we know that can help to transform the ways our bodies respond to stress. There's things that we can do. There's preventative things that we can do, and yet this stuff is not getting to everyday women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Later on in my life, I told you all, because I was a geriatric pregnancy. For one of my births, I literally almost died. Both my child and I.
Wow.
I mean, we were about to be those statistics.
Oh,
wow.
That's scary.
And it is.
Yeah.
And the reality is that it could happen to any of us as Black women. Our socioeconomic status, our educational prowess, none of those things inoculate us like it does for other communities. And I am hell-bent on making sure that this is a legacy that I can, on my own little corner of the world, speak into.
Yes.
And I really feel like, as you said, because it's so simple, it's so practical, you don't have to go buy a lot of equipment. You don't have to go to a space outside of where you are. These are tools and things that you can do every single day, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
And no matter what level of activity you may have physically, or depending on, just other physicalities, like this kind of levels the playing field in some sense, where you have access. It's accessible. It's accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how
I hear like.
Go ahead.
No, you go, Andrea.
No, go.
I'm hearing like myself and probably the listeners going like, okay, tell me, like, what are these things, or like, how do we bridge that gap? Like, what are some of those steps? And just to take it back a moment, when you were talking about stress, I thought one of the things you've talked a little bit about, and maybe you can bring this into the rooted method and share a little bit about that, which is that stress shouldn't be just a mere inconvenience, but it's a signal from our bodies. And so perhaps you can just talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our body's alarm system, like stress does not have to be this big evil thing. It's an indicator, right? It does turn into this big evil thing if we don't deal with the indicator lights, like on our dashboards in our car. When that low pressure light comes on for your tires, that is a signal you need to pull over. If you're on the freeway, you need to pull over to the side, and if there's an exit ramp, you might want to exit or get to the nearest place where you can be safe, because you have a slow leak and it's gotten to the point of the indicator light coming on. So it doesn't mean that the leak just started. It's likely that there's something has been going on for the indicator light to go off. Or even you think about your gas gauge. Now, I know some people, they won't fill up the tank. They're like, oh, the tank is on, if you're not an electrical vehicle. But I'm sure it would be the same, right? I don't have an EV, but there's the battery life or whatever, right? You get an indication of like, look, you need to do something. And for us, especially as Black women, definitely women in general, but especially Black women, and especially Christian Black women, because our churches promote it, our culture cultural ways in which we think about family, in which we think about giving, and I mean, we have a whole schema of terms, including the superwoman schema that impacts the ways in which we show up, right? Where we think we have to do more. I mean, and if you think about it, it's been a part of our history since we were enslaved. Right? It's this thought of us not seeing ourselves as human beings, us not being able to take on our femininity in a way that is divinely ours, where we have the ability and the autonomy of our body, of our mind. Our spirits, yes, could be free. But outside of that, these other things weren't. And somehow we keep perpetuating these ways of being and showing up. And so our stress symptoms are indicators like, hey, something's going on. We need to tend to it. Now, I will say that it's hard to do that. And why is it hard? Because culturally, we haven't been affirmed to do this. This is not a cultural norm in which we affirm people. We're like, girl, just put on your big girl panties and keep going. Or one of the you know, and people don't mean ill by this. This is a way in which we have learned to encourage and to protect, right? Or even when, because for me, when I was a little girl, oh my gosh, Mom, I love you. But if you listen to this, but my mom would always say, fix your face, because I was so expressive with my eyes. And so something would happen and I was displeased about something. And so like I was probably sucking my teeth and rolling my eyes, and it was always fix your face. Or when you get disciplined, and it's like, yeah, it hurt, or yeah, my feelings are hurt. I mean, a natural response would be to cry, but it's like, no, suck it up. Get it together. And then you learn to mask, you learn to, and in some way, yes, that did get me so far, right? A black little girl from Teviston, California, going to Harvard and UCLA, and how, you know, it was helpful, but at what cost?
Right. And you build up this, it's like this habit of like, okay, and once you get to a certain point, it's like, okay, maybe I don't need to respond that way anymore. Maybe I'm not in survival mode. There are times when we are, but maybe I'm not. And I think that that's what you're kind of challenging your readers on, is like, okay, I'm not trapped in this. I can actually listen to the signal. This isn't a bad thing. I can slow down. This can actually be good. And you really, in the book, you do that paradigm shift of like, this is good for you. This is safe.
Yes. It's good for you. It's safe. And it's reclaiming what is yours.
Yes, absolutely.
It's reclaiming this is yours. That way of thinking about yourself as needing to do more or to make up for someone's shortcomings. No, that's not yours. You know, especially for women of faith. Especially for people of faith.
They really get that.
So,
I'm thinking about like how rare it is when like you know, someone's got their feet up and they're, you know, just kicking back, and that we think in a moment like that, like, good for them, you know, like good on, like they're resting, they're chilling.
That, I mean, even I've written the book, and just a disclaimer or disclosure, not disclaimer, disclosure, and it's still challenging for me. There are still those moments where I find myself wanting to do, because that is how I've been programmed. And to do means to do for others as opposed to do for me. And that's why I also state in the book how important it is to have a community who also buys into these same principles. Because to do it by oneself is absolutely, I don't know how far you'll get, to be honest. Because it takes the community to reinforce these new value systems that one is learning. And if we have time,
it's hard to build that culture, you know, because cultures are so strong, right? And and like my wife Jamie, she always says, I want to go to people's houses where I can wear my pajamas and I can kick back on their couch and I'm allowed to open their fridge, and and sometimes we show up and we're like, I don't know what the rules are, and I don't know if we can just kick back here. And actually, we were at Andrea's house on the weekend, and Jamie went in and got ice out of your freezer, Andrea. And I was like, she's feeling comfortable.
Yes, that's good. It's good to know that.
You guys created that, that's how it felt. It felt like family. It felt like we didn't have to watch everything we were doing, and it just I love that, and that's a cult. You come over and rest, come over and chill, don't. And if we why do we perform so much, with all these things? And
right. And can we be the first to really start to set that in our friend groups, in our church groups, in our families? Can we start to set that environment, so hopefully we can, and then pass the book off, so hopefully we can start to create this flourishing garden that you talked about. And I'm getting antsy because I'm like, people need to know what this rooted method is. Tina, can you share a little bit about it? Because we know, but they don't know. And maybe how you talked about how it's transformed you. You've kind of been speaking to that, but just, a little bit on that.
So when you think about a plant, in order for a plant to grow, it has to have a solid root system. So rooted is really about, for you to flourish, let's start at the root. Let's start at the beginning. Let's cultivate practices and strategies for you to grow healthily, right? And strategies that you can implement. I'm not talking about some big thing that's out there. Although it's simple, I will say it's simple, but it's not always easy, because it is countercultural. But it is about renewing your mind by the ways in which you show up. So rooted is an acronym for 6 principles. The first one is reset. So reset is really about the simplistic version of reset is stop, breathe, ground yourself, and restart. Right? So real simple. So there's some practices that we go through, but resetting is really about that body of literature that talks about breath, that talks about mindfulness. Mindfulness is a huge buzzword, and it's more than just a buzzword. It's a body of literature that is very helpful. Also, the other thing that you don't see as much in the book, but in the workbook you'll see a lot more of this, is where we also talk about the African principles that we bring in. So when you talked about why decidedly is this book towards Black women, yes, it's because of the disparity health gap, but it's also about the ways in which African psychology is more holistic in nature. So we don't do that bifurcation between mind or body and spirit. It's all one. It's very holistic. And so it's something that really resonates in the ways that we show up. Again, most Black women, we're not in it just for our career. We're carrying a whole bunch of other people and beliefs and ideas and systems with us. So reset. After reset, then we go to and reset also is a lot of the reflection too, but then we go to observation. Observe is the second principle. So observe really is talking about awareness. How do we become aware of what's happening to us internally without judgment? So with curiosity, but not judgment, because once we start judging ourselves, it shuts it down. It shuts all of the reflection down. And in observation, the other critical thing is, especially when I'm working with Black women, is a lot of the time we do not create the space to reflect, neither do we create the space to actually lament. When we start carving out a lot of things that are happening, digging through it, we hit these pockets of pure grief that have just been sitting there that we have not been able to touch nor look at, and we just keep going because there's this ethos, you got to keep going. I don't feel like I have the time or the space to stop and pause. But when we say, well, what would happen if right now, if you passed away, would the world stop? You would have some people in your life that sure would cry, but do you think that they would have to continue on? Absolutely. And it was me coming to that hard reality. Like, I felt like I was the only one. I needed to do this. I had to do this. I had to do that. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm in the hospital, but the job and all the people at the job, they're continuing. Ain't nobody stopped. The cog didn't, me being outside of the wheel. So it's about observing, but more so about being able to understand what's happening internally. So that's the awareness, and that's all of the research and literature behind that. Then we go to the next O, which is orient. So it's really orienting ourselves to joy, gratitude, and self-compassion. So all Rob Edmondson's work, so all the great research around joy and why we look at joy and find those things in our lives that bring joy and happiness. Why we look at gratitude. What does gratitude actually do to our systems? How does it impact our mind, our cognitive abilities, all those things? And then self-compassion. So again, for Black women, that self-compassion piece is hard. We can be some hard, our inner critic comes out, and when that inner critic comes out, we are attacking ourselves. All these internalized messages of racism, of misogyny, of you name it, those messages are loud and clear, and they come out with a hammer. And so we really talk about how do you engage in practices that help. So we do compassion holds, we do affirmations. So all the literature on affirmations, gratitude, all that stuff is tied up in that principle. And then we go to T. The T of the rooted method is about talking. So it's about the value of talking with intentionality. So in Afrocentric circles, and even in other circles, but the power of narrative, the power of stories to heal. We see that in the Bible, the power of stories to teach, to train, to transform. So we think about, how do we share our stories? How do we do it in a vulnerable way? And how do we do it, especially when we've been hurt in these kind of instances before? So what does it look like to choose differently people to whom we can be vulnerable with, to whom we can share our stories, and also to whom which we can listen, so that we can share and learn from the person that we're sharing with. And then after talk, the E is exercise. And so we think about exercise as movement. It's about harnessing the power of movement that supports us physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And so one of the favorite things, so we also do a retreat with the rooted system. So one of my favorite things is we usually end up doing some kind of physical movement, and then it always culminates in some kind of line dance. Like we're end up doing the electric slide, or last time we were doing the wobble. I'm like, who knew that somebody had a little Bluetooth speaker, and before we knew it, everybody was like, hey. But now what we're going to incorporate, and I'm so excited about, is actually drumming. So we'll be doing some drumming and some West African dance during movement. So because we want people to recognize that movement have many purposes. So we actually dive into the literature in terms of helping to reduce the cortisol, in terms of helping to increase serotonin and dopamine, in terms of really helping us just to get this sense of groundedness, and especially what it shared, and just the laughter that naturally comes when we're moving, and the sensuality and tapping into that femininity part. So there's a lot that happens in exercise, but it's not just your traditional, let's go, lift some weights, and all of those things are good, but we're looking specifically at how to leverage movement.
And there's so much about that, isn't it? Like with just like polyvagal theory, or
absolutely.
Rhythmic movement, and that's how we soothe a baby, right? Like rhythmically, with humming and dancing and tapping,
all of that. And then the final one is D, which is disrupt. And I think this is one where everybody can just jump in real easily, because it's about disrupting limiting beliefs, disrupting negative thoughts. What I like to say is, be careful what you say to yourself, because you're listening. And so it's like, what is your self-talk? We give tools and strategies for managing that, talking about cognitive dissonance. So we really break down, the cognitive triangle, or even as we think about just some of the Adinkra symbols and the ways in which we utilize that, really talks about how by being able to connect with self, we're connecting with others. So recognizing that even the ways that we're talking to ourselves impacts our ability to connect with others. And so the rooted system, at each each of the strategies or each of the pillars is not only about the individual, but hopefully you also heard how it applies to the community. So at each level, or at each layer, we're thinking about, okay, how are we utilizing this for ourselves, but also how is this community that's around me helping me to utilize these. So we say healing takes place within the context of community. You know, that's why we believe that in the Bible it says he places us in families.
Yes.
And the family could be those that you are of your same blood, or it could be those of your choosing. You know, but it's about doing this work together. So that's kind of a quick overview of the principles of Rooted.
Yeah, I think, and I love how you have woven throughout that community aspect and just maintaining that, because this is who we are. This is a part of our design too. And so for us to not forget that aspect. And I really, as I was reading through, and Abe and I were kind of talking about it too, like, it's just so holistic. I think, Abe, you were like, it's like a great handbook of like knowledge. It's easy to kind of like, to read it. It doesn't take a lot of time. Like, I can tell you had a clear audience. Like, it was like, okay, I can do this. I can read this. Like, it doesn't take long. And like you said, they're simple, not easy, but simple. And I was just so practical. I was just so grateful for the knowledge you were sharing in the book, and how you broke everything down.
It's like a perfect day. Like, it, you know, when I heard you describing that, I was like, I just want that to be my day today. Like, I want it to start with R, and then O, and then O, and then D, and then D. And that would be like a lovely way to spend your day, you know, and then life.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And the fact that, I mean, with the reset principle too, is like, you can always start again. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I didn't get this, or oh, this didn't happen, or oh, this thing happened. It's like, that's real life. You know, that's how life shows up. But we can, right now, I can restart. Where do I want to start? Where do I want to pick up?
So gentle.
Yes.
Gentle on yourself. And thanks for breaking it down for us as well, because I'm guessing that was a bit of work just to you know, deliver so succinctly. Well, we're gonna have to.
I've had a little bit of practice.
I can tell.
Several years of researching these things.
So.
No, seriously. Clear. And it's like, I know, and it's, you know, like, it's funny because we do this work, and Andrea and we're always like hearing people talk, and sometimes there's things where I'm like, no, I don't know if I agree with that, you know, or something. Like, yeah, that's an opinion. Everything you said, I was like, I'm with you on all of it. Like, I was like, yeah, all of it, absolutely. Sounds so good. I'm really glad everyone that listens to us is going to be able to hear that and get your stuff. And, you know, white Australian male over here, and it all applies to me as well. Like, it's, you know, so I'm like, I think maybe even more so than some things.
It's an interesting piece, and I don't know if you'll include this or not, or I might even feel ashamed that I'm saying, well, I don't feel ashamed, but like, oh, am I going to say this? But I tell you, I struggled with writing this for a decidedly Black female audience. I struggled not because I didn't think it was important and necessary to do, but I struggled because I recognized that in God's kingdom, all people can benefit from this. Like, even people that don't recognize they're part of the family, they can benefit. Yet I recognize that there is this unique way in which culturally Black women have been disadvantaged. Black women have been disproportionately impacted. And so I wanted to make sure that it was clear, like, no, this is for you. This is
totally,
you know, this experience, it is real. You have experienced these things. I don't care if people try to say that you haven't, like, and here are some ways in which you can navigate this. But it's almost even like really great pedagogy, right? Great pedagogy, when you are trying to target a particular audience, great pedagogy actually benefits everybody.
For sure.
Right? Or especially if I'm thinking about you're writing an IEP for someone, and the ways in which you can break it down so that it can be accessible, can benefit everybody, although it was clearly tailored for this group. So it is a struggle.
Yeah,
It is a struggle
yeah,
because
yeah.
I used to run, so I did, most recently I ran the Black Women's Spirituality and Health Lab, but prior to that I ran the Women of Color Wellness and Resilience Lab. And so, I have some of my students, a Latina student who's taken this model and adapted it. I've had a Black male student who's taken this model and is adapting it. So I think there's a way in which, you're right, people can benefit from this, but it was a struggle. It was not is, but it was.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to like say, okay, I'm gonna focus on this and trust God in that,
There
and
you
just
go.
being like,
There you go.
okay, God, everybody can use this, but He's like, no, I want you to write to Black women, and then I can do the rest. I can then people can use this as a template, and I think in a way when it is specific, it helps, it gives a place for other people to be able to take it forward and to make it their own, different groups and things like that. But it's important. It's important. Like you said, I loved what you said, where you're like, this is for you, Black women. And I think that there's something so, gosh, I don't even know the word, but just something so like precious about that, of like, this is for you. This is yours, because so often it's not mine, taken from me, but this is yours. I made this for you. And I can even hear the heart of God in that, This is for you. I see you,
I like that. Yeah. Because when something is tailored for us, there's just this, like you said, there's this preciousness. There's, I see you. You feel seen. You feel heard. You feel appreciated. It's kind of like going back to what your wife, Abe, wants, right? When she goes to someone's house, she wants to be able just to show up as she is, not have to perform, not have to, for me, and this may be your experience too, Andrea, when I read books, I'm constantly, I'm reading it, but then I'm also reading the context, and then I'm also like pulling out, extracting for what this means for me as a Black woman and what doesn't work. And like all this is happening while I'm just reading something.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in this book, it's an opportunity. It's a lot of work. This is just an opportunity for you to read, and it's like you reading, a love letter to you.
Yeah, you don't need to decipher and translate and apply it to yourself. Like it's written for your community, and it's like the Imago Dei principle as well. Just that, like, we're all image of God, and we're all different, and we're all diverse, and that's so that means we're not all the same, and so that God, like you were saying, Andrea, like there are things that God would say specifically to you or to your community, or people that look like you, and people from your background, and he goes after the lost sheep, right? He goes after the one. He doesn't just stay with the big group all the time. And so so I love that you've written like your letter to your people, and it's like your calling, and it's your passion, and so it's like where the fire is for you anyway. It's the fun
absolutely.
For you, and
absolutely.
Go where the fire is.
Girl, it's hot. It's hot.
Yes.
We
gosh,
gotta go, right?
Yes. And Tina, you were the first person that we didn't even get to we didn't even get through half of the questions. Like typically we'll miss two, like we didn't even, and I think that just speaks to just the energy that you brought, just how enjoyable it was just to hear from you and be able to talk back and forth. And so I just thank you so much. I wish you so much success in this book that's coming out. When is it coming out?
It's coming out September 19th.
September 19th,
okay.
2024. So that there's excitement there for you for that. But I'm just so grateful that we were able to do this and all just speak together on this.
My pleasure. It's definitely been a pleasure.
Thanks everyone for listening to the show. Be sure to follow Dr. Tina at Dr. Tina Armstrong on Instagram, and her website, drtinaarmstrong.com. Very easy. And her book, Rooted, which is coming out September 19th.
And follow us on Instagram, Rise and Form, We're also on Spotify and Apple. Like us there, subscribe to our podcast there, and tell your friends.